Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video we're continuing with the scripture citation index and finding out where these terms come up in general conference talks and how many times and what years and so on and so forth. This time we're going to be talking about the terms Enoch, city of holiness, and falling upon their necks to see how often that comes up in general conference talks. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you end up liking it. Make sure to leave your thoughts and opinions and any ideas that you have in the comments below. Also make sure to share this with anyone that might find this interesting. So Enoch, in the city of Enoch, as you know, is basically, for all intents and purposes, it's a second coming idea. We have the original story of when Enoch was on the earth and he had his city, but then it was taken up into heaven. And one of the main events of the second coming is that it's going to come back down and join with the New Jerusalem. So that's why I decided to search for these terms. Um, the name of the city is Zion, but it's also City of Holiness. So that's why I have that here. This is like a specific to the city of Enoch. And then fall upon their necks. That comes from the scripture in Moses 7. I'm going to read both scriptures that have to do with City of Holiness and then falling upon their necks. So Moses 7:19, we have, and Enoch continued his preaching in righteousness unto the people of God. And it came to pass in his days that he built the city that was called the City of Holiness, even Zion. Okay, so this is where that term comes from, City of Holiness. And then, okay, right here in 63, we have, and the Lord said unto Enoch, then shalt thou and all thy city meet them there, and we will receive them into our bosom. And they shall see us, and we shall fall upon their necks, and they shall fall upon our necks, and we will kiss each other. Now, I personally don't really have plans to do this, but I will be happy to see them. Okay, so over here, how many times do these terms come up? Okay, so the first column, column F, is Enoch, column Z, City of Holiness, column AB, fall upon their necks. Okay, so we're scrolling up. Looks like we have a pretty good cluster here in the 50s. Okay, but there's not a whole lot for City of Holiness, just right here in 53. Okay, now we have an even bigger cluster in the 60s, and then still not a whole lot of City of Holiness, but it is here. Okay, and then just like every other term that I've searched, we have a big old cluster in the 70s. We got a red, which is 8 times. We have some yellows, 6, 5, 5, and then 4, 4, 3. So a lot in the 70s, as is to be expected. A bunch in the 60s in this case, and then we have kind of like a smaller cluster in the early 50s. Okay, and not so much really in the 40s. Okay, so let's move on. So they're still talking about him in the 80s, and then just every so often, maybe every other year, it looks like City of Holiness is also being referenced. Now, this right here, City of Holiness, may be in the same talk as over here, because they're probably reading one of these scriptures, and so City of Holiness shows up along with Enoch, right? Okay, so going through, and yeah, there's quite a bit of talk. We're in the 90s now. Okay, now we're seeing a couple years where it skips for Enoch. Before 92, it's actually pretty solid. It's solid all the way down to 58. So from 1958 all the way up until 1991, he is mentioned every single year at least one time, and normally more than just once. In fact, typically more than just twice. Okay, but anyway, 1992, skip. Okay, 93, 94, 95, skip. 96, 97, 98, 99, skip. Okay, and now we have another cluster that's happening after the millennium. Okay, year 2000, and then immediately after that, there's kind of a uptick in talking about Enoch, including a reference to the city of Holiness in 2008. The last time that the city of Holiness was referenced was 91 and 98 during the end of this big streak right here. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, now we're having more and more blank spots right here. 2010, 12, and now this is interesting. Now we have a 2-year gap for 2016 and 2015, as well as 2019 and 2018. So to this point, there have been 1-year gaps, but not 2-year gaps. This is unusual. And then in the middle of those, there's kind of a bigger year where he's mentioned 3 times in 2017, which, if you've been watching the channel and other channels, we know that 2017 is kind of a special year for many different reasons, including the eclipse, the Great American Eclipse, the Revelation 12 sign. It was the last year of President Monson's presidency before he passed away January of 2018. Excuse me, it was the Hebrew year 5777, and there were a bunch of other things that happened. It was a special year. Okay, so because when we go back here, you're not going to find any 2-year gaps. You'll find a few 1-year gaps, but you have to go all the way back to World War II, 1945, to find anything that's a 2 or more year gap in talking about Enoch. So there's this big gap during World War II, and then all the way until 2015, there's only 1-year gaps, and there's very few of them. And then, strangely, like I said, we have 2-year gaps, almost back to back. Well, then it would become a 4-year gap. So I guess they kind of are back to back with this 2017 with 3 mentions. Okay, now in 2020, we have 7 mentions. And not just that, 2 mentions of City of Holiness, and then 1 mention, and the only mention so far, of falling upon their necks. So 2020, as it turns out, is a big year for talking about Enoch in General Conference. In 2021, there's just 1 time of just Enoch. Okay, so in other words, first mention of falling upon their necks, 2 mentions, and the only time that there's been 2 of City of Holiness. Every other time, it's only been 1. And then as far as Enoch goes, well, we have a 7, which is pretty rare. It's pretty rare. Now, it doesn't break the record. We can go back here to 1973, where he's mentioned 8 times. And again, that's not surprising because for some reason, there was a lot of activity, a lot of Second Coming talk back in the 70s and also in the 60s, but mostly in the 70s. Okay, so there you have it. Now, in this case here, I looked it up. Okay, I have the 3 tabs open, one for Enoch, one for City of Holiness, one for fall upon their necks. The person that mentions all 3 terms is President Eyring during his Sisters in Zion talk. It's interesting because, everyone already recognized that this was kind of an unusual talk and a kind of explicit talk when talking about the Second Coming and the generation of women that are going to prepare for that time. So this was already kind of like a highlighted talk, but now as we're looking at the tracker, it's really unprecedented. It's the only talk ever that's ever mentioned this scripture, falling upon their necks. It's the only time. So he felt it important to put that in his talk, but somehow nobody else did since 1942. I find that kind of odd. And then here we have for City of Holiness, we have President Eyring in that same talk, and then also D. Todd Christofferson. And as it turns out, as I've been doing this research, D. Todd Christofferson actually comes up quite a bit when it comes to the second coming. So I don't know if he has like a special mission in regards to the second coming, or but it seems like that's one of his topics that keeps coming up. So I'll leave you with that. So here you go. Just more interesting things. First time that this has ever been mentioned. First time that this has been mentioned in 1 year more than just one time. And then this big spike right here of 7. And then these 2-year gaps back to back with 3 in 2017. You have to think that that's kind of odd. I don't think it's just looking into it, because as you can see, it's just like it's so normal, it looks like, for Enoch to just be brought up every single year, and then only having 1-year gaps at most, and then all of a sudden we have 2-year gaps. I mean, I don't know, if we went on for another 100 years, maybe this would look more normal, having 2-year gaps, or maybe if we had more data, like going back before 1942. But there you have it. Those are my observations. And I think it's interesting. I think this is telling, honestly. I really do. Okay, so I'll leave that with you. Let me know what your interpretation is, or what your thoughts are about this. Um, Thoughts, opinions, and so forth. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it. Make sure to share it with anyone that's interested in this topic of Enoch, the city of Enoch, and the second coming. And I'll talk to you guys later.